Welcome. Let me just pull up my notes real quick. All right. Well, hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Kaylin Beltran, and I'm an assistant director with our graduate business programs here at the University of San Diego School of Business. Today's Giving Tuesday, and we wanted to give back to our community. So we partnered with Dr. Ken Blanchard and asked him to share some best practices on how to bring out the best in your team and your people through servant leadership. I've had the pleasure of meeting and getting to know Ken through my role of admissions for our Masters in Executive Leadership program, also known as MSEL. It's one of our graduate business programs where he, along with his wife, Margie, teach. And so I can assure you, as I have heard him speak before, that we are all in for a treat tonight. Additionally, Christine Wu, a former MSEL student of Ken's, will be facilitating the conversation, or fireside chat, if you will, followed by a Q&A. A little bit about Christine. She is a business and corporate attorney. She is an adjunct professor here at the University of San Diego School of Business. She's a two-time graduate of the University of San Diego, part of MSEL cohort 18, along with a School of Law graduate. Christine's personal leadership goal is to master the art of self-leadership and apply it consistently in her life. And her personal leadership goal is to teach servant leadership to law students and young lawyers to grow and cultivate responsible and intentional leaders in the legal industry. I'll now pass it over to Christine, who will introduce Ken.
Thank you, Kellen. Good evening and welcome to Bringing Out the Magnificence in Your Team. Thank you for joining us on this very special event during the craziest of times. I don't think we've ever imagined we would have a Zoom meeting with Ken with over 120 people. There will be a Q&A segment, so please send your questions in the chat. If you'd like to ask the question yourself, please indicate so by saying I'd like to ask. That way I can call on you and you'll be able to unmute yourself. We just want to be able to allow you to engage with Ken as much as we can. So without further ado, I'm honored to introduce Ken Blanchard. We all know he's an educator, mentor, businessman, author, researcher, husband, father, grandfather, and the list goes on. I'd like to briefly share the three most impressive things I know about Ken in lieu of reading his bio. However, I'm going to send in the chat a link to the Blanchard Company website where his bio is available, and you'll find additional information on his impressive accomplishments and accolades. So first, Ken is a family man. Ken proudly shares that when he married his wife, Margie, he married up, which I think is very endearing and honest. When he talks about his family, he lights up and you can feel how important they are to him. For me, it's a reminder that as humans, we are whole beings. Family and loving relationships are just as important, if not the most important, to our purpose and success, as well as anything else. Second, Ken is a spiritual man. As Chief Spiritual Officer at the Ken Blanchard Companies, Ken brings a unique element to the world of corporate America. His spirituality plays a big part in his philosophies and teachings, how he runs his company, how he leads, and he's personally inspired me to explore my own spirituality. Lastly, Ken walks the talk. We talk a lot about this in MSEL. Being a servant leader means your commitment to the growth of others and helping them win, which he'll talk about, I'm sure. As one of the founders of the innovative MSEL program here at USD, he commits to training and growing current and future business leaders. This program has changed my life personally and professionally, and a lot of my own cohort mates are here on this call. It taught me that while accounting and marketing are important areas in the business world, so is our compassion, empathy, and care for ourselves and others. Essentially, he humanizes business. So I'm so grateful to welcome Ken Blanchard. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Christine. How you doing? Appreciate
Good.
it.
Of course. And I know you want to dive in on a little bit about the background of MSEL, which I think is a perfect segue. So would you like to talk a bit about that journey?
Yes, about over 20 years ago, I was kind of looking at a lot of the MBA programs. And what I realized is they didn't teach much about leadership. They put it in an organizational behavior class. And to me, leadership is so important. Whether you're running a team, you're running your family, you're working with an individual and all. And so I ran into Curtis Cook, who was the dean of the business school at that time, and he was a businessman. He wasn't a typical academic. And I told him about my belief. Why didn't we start a master's degree program where the emphasis was on leadership? Because I think effective leadership is a transformational journey, beginning with self-leadership, which is getting to know yourself. Most of the leaders I run into who are a problem are scared little kids inside because they aren't real comfortable with who they are and all. And so we start with self-leadership, and then we go to one-on-one leadership where you're really getting a chance to build a trusting relationship. And then we move to team leadership where you're trying to build a sense of community. And finally, organizational leadership where you're trying to build a culture. And so I talked to Curtis in February 21 years ago, and we were recruiting students by November. You don't do that in universities very often, but it's really been fun. And we've had a lot of great people like Christine in there, because we want people who have been around the barn a little bit and really want to make their careers even better and make a bigger difference in people. So, but we love the University of San Diego. We think it's the best teaching university by far around here. And so it's good to be with you all today, that's for sure.
I know, and I think congrats are in order. We started cohort 22 this year. So that's 22 years of amazing hard work in this program, which I cannot express how important that work is. So thank you, Ken, for everything you've done for us. Before we dive in, I know there are a lot of alums, current students, but maybe some guests that have never heard of the concept or any of your work around servant leadership. So I wanted to see if you could give us a bird's eye view of what servant leadership means and why you think it's important, especially in this day and age.
Well, Christine, when I talk to people out in the business world initially about servant leadership, they think I'm talking about the inmates running the prison or trying to please everybody or some kind of religious movement. And they don't understand that there's really two parts of servant leadership. And it's the only leadership philosophy I know that you can maximize great results and great human satisfaction. And John Maxwell, who wrote the foreword to the book I wrote with 45 key people in the area like Simon Sinek and Brene Brown and Marshall Goldsmith and Patrick Lencioni and Laurie Beth Jones and all called Servant Leadership in Action. And John said in his foreword, it's the only way to get great results and great human satisfaction. And the reason is because there's just two parts of servant leadership. The first is vision, direction, values, and goals, because as a leader, leadership is about going somewhere. And if people don't know where you want them to go, then there's little chance they're going to get there. And so that's the responsibility of the hierarchy. It doesn't mean that you don't involve people, but it really starts the whole thing off. And so when you talk about building a high performing team, what's the first thing you want to do if you got a new team or even taking over a team is say, okay, if it's a new team, what's our vision? What business are we in? What are we trying to accomplish? And if we do a good job, what's going to happen? What's the values that are going to drive our journey? What's our goals and all? And so that's the leadership part of servant leadership. And once that's set and you involve your people in establishing that, you don't lay that on them, then you move to the servant part of servant leadership. And that's when we turn the pyramid upside down. And now you work for them. They don't work for you. And your job is to help them win. What? Accomplish the goals, live according to the vision that you've established. And so that's why it's so powerful. And the beginning of creating a great team is understanding those two elements.
That's amazing stuff. Thanks, Ken. So I guess my next question would be off that point is, let's say you meet an individual who leads a team of let's say 10 people, but they've never heard of servant leadership or even the idea of intentional leadership, where you take into account how your team feels and you make decisions based on what's best for the team. What would you recommend that person take as the first step to start that journey?
Well, the first step would be what I was mentioning, is to say, why was this team established? What is our mission? What business are we in? If we do a good job, what's the picture of the future? What will we accomplish? What are the values that are going to guide our journey? What are the goals that we want? And so that's where you start. You just don't, a lot of times people say the words team, and you think it's, pooling of ignorance and all that kind of thing. As a leader, if you take over a team, you have to guide that journey by beginning to focus on, vision, direction, values, and goals. Again, I don't say you dump it on them, but you say the first thing we got to do is focus on this. And if it's an established team, ask them, what business are we in? What are we trying to accomplish? What are our values? What are the goals? And if they go, duh, now you say, okay, I guess we know where we're going to start.
I know when we were in school, and even some of the questions we've gotten from some of our attendees, the question comes from, as an individual, what can I do if I'm not the person who controls that element of creating the vision of the team? Let's say I'm just a team member. What can that person do to try to make a difference, especially when you have a resistant leader?
Well, the first thing is that if you have a resistant leader and you want to try to help them, you first have to develop a relationship with them. I remember I was working in a college of business, years ago, and the dean who came in, he wrote a lot about participative management, but he didn't practice any of it. And the faculty would go in and tell him what he was doing wrong, and he needed shit, and he'd throw him out of the office, And so I knew that if I was going to have an impact on him, I had to have a personal relationship with him. So I stopped him in the hall because he had done a lot of writing and I was just getting going. And I said, George, I just wrote this article. I'd love to get published. And you've written a lot. Would you be willing to help me in my this article? Oh, he said, sure. I went to he had flip charts and, and all this kind of thing. And so I had several meetings with him about writing projects I had. And during the second or third meeting, he said to me, Ken, what do you think we should do with all the jerks we have in this school? And the key word was, what should we do? Because I had a personal relationship. So don't start telling somebody how to run the team if you're not running it, and then maybe do it. But first develop a relationship. Find out what you can, reinforce that they're good at. Maybe they like to, play some golf, or they like to do. How can you develop a relationship so that they will look at you as a member of their team? And then you maybe give people feedback. Because remember that every time you give somebody feedback, I don't care how good it is that you do it, it takes something from the relationship. If you have nothing in the glass, if you look at it like water in a glass, if there's nothing in that thing, you have nothing to draw on. You need a mask and a gun. So what you need to do is first, build that relationship and find out how you can do that and what a difference it can make.
Speaking of challenges, so as you know, and I'm sure you've been doing it as well, we've all been working from home for probably 8 months now, and probably will continue to do so in months to come and indefinitely. So we're talking about the challenges of getting to know people, which some people really feel the virtual setting is really difficult. What advice do you have for some of us who are struggling with having to interact with our coworkers, our leaders virtually, and how can we be more proactive to become a better leader?
Well, the first thing you want to get out of your vocabulary, Christine, is I'm struggling with this, rather than saying, one of the really, silver linings of this whole COVID is Zoom. And I can really continue, in fact, build relationships through Zoom. It's a wonderful way to get to know people and to say, wow, because I've been holding group meetings, on Zoom and it just works fine. Now, if you say, well, you didn't know the people, well, you can get to know them that way. Your first meeting, you might let's just go around and talk about, what do you think your strengths are? What would you like this team to be? Start to find out where they are and look at it. I think that after the COVID, the Zoom thing is going to really be here to stay. It's not that we're going to no longer have face-to-face classes, but I think we're going to find that we can really do things. We had an all-company meeting recently, and my son Scott is now the president of our company, our leadership training company. We had 225 people on a Zoom call. I mean, that was amazing. We had people from Asia and from India and from South America and Canada and all over the place. I mean, it was really amazing. And to get people together face to face might be hard, you know. And so I think when you get people face to face, it's really good. I mean, somebody said, what do I miss most because of the COVID? Hugging. I'm a hugger, you know. And I hug both men and women, you know, and so it's fun.
Yeah. Thank you for that reminder. I know that certainly in these times, I tend to think more negatively than looking at the positives. So I love that. And I agree. I think that Zoom is giving us capabilities that we've never had before. So I appreciate that perspective, of course. Okay, great. We're getting a lot of questions. One final question I have for you, Ken, before I jump into questions from the group. And it kind of piggybacks on what you just said. And I think we'd all agree that while the pandemic has been scary and challenging, I personally have tried to view it as an area of personal growth and reflection, which I know you really emphasize in your teachings, is the ability to reflect on our experiences. What have you learned, whether about yourself, our community, society, or humanity in general, during this unprecedented time that you would like to share with us?
Well, I think one of the great silver linings of this is that I've been able to take something I've talked about for years and start to implement it, which is enter my day slowly, you know, because we have two selves. We have an external task-oriented self that's used to getting jobs done. And then we have a thoughtful, reflective self. Now, which one do you think wakes up quicker in the morning? It's the task-oriented self. Why? Because the alarm clock goes off. And a friend of mine said, why don't we call it the opportunity clock, or it's going to be a great day. No alarm. And you jump into your task-oriented self and you're eating while you're, you know, trying to get dressed. And you jump in your car, and all this. This is the way life has been before COVID. And you're just running around here and all there. And you get home at night and you're exhausted and fall into bed, don't have any energy to say goodnight to somebody who might be lying next to you. Next day, boom, you're out of there. And very often, I think I was caught, and a lot of people before, in a rat race. And I love Lily Talman, the great Hollywood philosopher. She said, the problem with a rat race is even if you win it, you're still a rat, you know? And so one of the things I have found is that if I enter my day slowly and I take a look at, because one of the things that we do in our leadership point of view course that Margie and I teach as part of the Master of Science is helping people write their own mission statement, their own picture of the future and set of values and all. And what I try to do is I want to read mine. Like my mission statement is to be a loving teacher and example of simple truths that helps myself and others to awaken to the presence of love of God in our lives. So we realize that we're here to serve, not to be served. And I want to read that. And then what are my goals? You know, what are my values? You know, my values are spiritual peace, you know, integrity, you know, love and joy. Okay. What am I going to do to practice those? And so when I enter my day slowly, I think about who I want to be today. Then I start to look at maybe what are the Zoom meetings I have, or whatever things and all. And then what's really interesting, Christine, at the end of the day, a friend of mine wrote me a while back and he said, you've goofed up my life for a long time. And he said, he said, I've never written a journal because, I've seen people write journals in 3 colors and they write them in poetry and all. And he said, I finally was realizing the other day, you know what my journal ought to be, which I started. It's really interesting. You just put the date at the top and then you write praisings. And praisings is, what did I do today that's consistent with who I want to be in the world, you know? So what do I want to pat my back up for? And then redirections, redirects, you know, what did I do today? I wish I had instant replay and I could do again, you know, because I maybe was a little quick with that person, or I didn't do this as well as I wanted. And boy, I think one of the things that this COVID can do is, the old philosophy, life is not worth living that's unexamined. And so you have time, I think, to examine your life.
I struggle with that so much. So if anybody else struggles with this, is I wake up and I look right at my phone, and my day starts before I even get out of bed. So I think your advice about journaling and taking your time in the morning, because we do have all that extra time if you don't commute to work anymore, is such great advice, and something that it's so difficult for me to change those habits.
Yes. Another tough habit is to leave your phone down in the kitchen. Don't have it right next to your bed. You
Do you
know,
do that, Ken? Do you keep your phone in
I,
the
I'm
kitchen?
working on that. That's a tough one.
No, I think
So, but
that's
I tell
definitely
you,
a
when I've done it, I sleep so much better, you know.
Mhm.
I'm not thinking, well, God, I love to look at this and that.
Yeah. What I'll do is I think I'm going to put my charger in a different room, and then I'll email you and let you know how that goes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions. So I just wanted to let know one of our current cohort 22 members are in the chat. So I'm going to let him ask his question in a bit. So I'll start off with some in the chat that were sent. So from Bob, he's asking, who is the best servant leader that you have studied? And he said, thanks in advance. Merry Christmas to you and Margie.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's interesting. Who's the best servant leader that I've got a chance to work with? Well, I've had a chance to work with several, but I wrote a book with Colleen Barrett, who became the president of Southwest Airlines when Herb Kelleher stepped down. And she was an amazing person. She was actually his executive secretary for years. And when he knew he was going to step down, he didn't want to bring in some Jack Welch lookalike, you know, to come in like this because they already had a clear vision. He wanted somebody who philosophically just lived turning the pyramid upside down. And Colleen was probably the best servant leader that I've ever seen. And the book I wrote with her was called Lead with Love. And love is spelled L-U-V, which is their symbol. Another great servant leader is right here in San Diego. It's Gary Ridge, president of WD-40. And he was in our first cohort here at University of San Diego, the MSEL program. But you know what their employee engagement score the last time they took it at WD-40? 93%. Now, who has a 93% kind of thing, except an organization run by a servant leader who really realizes the great servant leaders that I've known, Colleen and Gary and others, realize that their number one customer is their people. And if they take care of their people, love on their people, train on their people, you know, empower their people, they will go out of their way to take care of your number two customer, which is the people who use your products and services. And then they're going to become raving fans of your organization. And they're going to be part of your sales force. And that takes care of the profit and the things. I mean, a lot of people think the reason to be in business is to make money. No. And you all out there, put this on your forehead, you know. Profit is the applause you get for creating a motivating environment for your people so they'll take care of your customers.
I do love your relationship with Gary. So, Gary was in the first cohort, which you would tell us, and now he teaches at MSEL, which I think is so great to be able to hear how not only have you guys grown together, but just how that worked out when you first started. So thank you for sharing that. The next question is from Diana. Her question is, what advice do you have for aspiring leaders who want to grow into a team lead position?
Well, my best advice to you is to realize that you're there to serve, not to be served. And if you take care of your people, as I said, and motivate them and help them accomplish their goals, you're going to take care of the customers that you have to take care of, and you're going to be noticed. You know, people go, wow, you know, and so recognize that they're not going to notice you because you got your hand up saying, notice me. They're going to notice you because of what your people do and the difference they're making out there. So you got to always remember, you work for your people, they don't work for you.
Important advice, especially when we're so used to ingrained with the idea that as a leader, you're always in front of your team versus alongside or even behind your team.
Yes.
Great. Okay, Lynn, let's go with you first.
I mean, that's what you should be speaking up about, and that the best way that you can get promoted, as I said, was by your people really doing well, and so just the more and more you can involve them in decision making, and for them to realize that it's we, not me, and none of us is as smart as all of us, and those kinds of things, I think, eventually will make a difference. If you have a top-down organization that just doesn't, believe in that, and you've tried everything to develop relationships, you ought to go somewhere else eventually. Don't beat yourself up in a place that doesn't believe what you are. But if you can convince people of the power of that, then other people can ripple up the organization as well as down.
Thank you, Alan. We have Brandon next.
Things that we always say to the students coming out of our class is that when you go back to work, you might want to get a group of people, not only your people, but other people, and say, I just went through this particular course and learned a lot about a concept called servant leadership. And I'd like to share with you a little bit about it. And then I'd like to ask the question is, what aspect of this might be appropriate for us? So you don't come back and say, boy, I took this course and you idiots, you better get with the program. No, here's what I learned. Here's what I got out of it. I just wonder what you think. Could this possibly apply to what we're doing and all? And so always make it sure that they know that you're thinking about how it helps them. It's not about you.
Thank you. Okay, so a question from the chat, and this is similar to something you mentioned about Zoom. Laura wanted to see if you had any suggestions on how we can stay connected. I know you mentioned that scheduling Zooms, but if someone struggles with doing that, and sorry, if someone would like more additional opportunities to be better on how we can engage more on Zoom, what would your advice be?
Well, I think, again, I would try to create a Zoom meeting with the group and say, we don't know how long this COVID is going to last. And what I like to do at this particular meeting is to say, talk as a group, how can we make Zoom a vehicle that can really help us build our team during this tough times, rather than us say, oh God, we're going to do this. What could we do together? And some people say, well, I feel a little uncomfortable with Zoom. Well, who can we get? Who feels comfortable that could maybe be a mentor to you one-on-one on that, and see who can help, but constantly sort of say, hey, how are we going to do this thing together? And so
okay, we have Mark up next.
Talk about, these are different approaches, but what's the commonality between them? What do they have this, rather than I don't spend any time putting other approaches down. I say, tell me more. I want to learn about what you have and see where that might fit in, because again, you don't have to have just one approach. How can you integrate the different approaches? And when we developed SL2, our approach to situational leadership, we looked at a lot of different things that were out there and saw how we could pull those together, including the work at Ohio State and Bill Redden and Shine and all kinds of people. And I think that's where the best theories are. Is it kind of takes a look at a bunch of them and not saying I want to find out one. What can I learn and maybe integrate them into something that works for me.
Okay, great. We had a question from someone on their iPhone. I don't know their name, but I think it's a great one. How do you convince a CEO to transition out of the tsunami zone or continual project execution and into building, strengthening, and maintaining culture?
What's a tsunami zone? What is?
Um, it was defined in, let's just say, maybe the chaos of day-to-day business.
Uh-huh.
Focus on the profits, operations, things like that.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting is I don't ever want you to get the impression that I don't think profits or performance is not important because, it really is. It's just how do you get the best performance? Because if you're just running a place as a servant leader and you want, having everybody loving on each other and all, I mean, that's not about business. You want good morale, but you want also good performance. So at WD-40, people really love working with each other, but man, they are performing. Since Gary took over at the 300 million, they're up in well over several billion now. So you want to constantly build the uh, the capacity there. And one thing is this is just maybe an aside of we talk about the best leadership style. I ended up starting a ministry called Lead Like Jesus because after the 1 Minute Manager came out, I was invited on the Hour of Power with Robert Schuller in his heyday. And he said, Ken, who's the greatest 1 Minute Manager of all time? I said, who is that? He said, Jesus. I said, really? He said, yeah, he was really clear on goals. Isn't that your first secret 1 minute goal? Yeah. And he said, you and Tom Peters didn't invent management by wandering around. Jesus did. He wandered from one little town to another little town. And anybody showed any interest, he'd praise him, heal him. He said, isn't that your second 1 minute prayer? Yeah. And he said, if people stepped out of line, he wasn't afraid to give them a 1 minute reprimand. He threw the money lenders out of the temple, and I went, whoa, that's really interesting, And so I had kind of gotten away from my faith and all that. But then I decided to read the Gospels, and I just laughed because everything that I had ever done or written about leadership, Jesus did with these 12 incompetent guys he hired. I mean, you wouldn't have hired that lot, And so it's just been fun to kind of look at that. And that's spread around the world now. Our Lead Like Jesus ministry is housed in South Carolina because it's much more receptive for that kind of thing down in the South and all. But I just wanted just aside to say that's just another element because he was the ultimate servant leader. Because what did Jesus say? Even I have come to serve, not to be served.
Speaking of around the world, I wanted to share this with you. So we asked the question of where everyone's calling from, and there are attendees from all over the world. So we have anywhere from New York, but we also have Mexico and Australia all here to listen to you, Ken. So I just wanted to share that, just
Great.
how you are changing our lives.
Are you saying New York's another country?
I'm just saying it's really far away from San Diego.
I actually grew up in New Rochelle, New York, right outside it.
Yeah. So we do have a wide range of attendees from all over the world. So I just thought that you'd be really excited about that. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. I do want to call on Sandy. She is from cohort 9, and she has a question for you.
First of all, I'd be real clear because I think your overall organizational mission and goal is a wonderful one, by what was it, the cure, disease as much as they possibly can. I mean, I would keep that front and center and then say, okay, what can we do about that? Now, we obviously have to go after some areas where we don't actually know what might come out of it, But the point is, we're always trying to, in everything we do, that big picture goal to really make a difference for humanity and their health, and so look at different groups and say, okay, what are you all going to take a look at? Well, that's really kind of interesting. I'm not sure what's going to come out of it exactly, but go at it, and let's talk. And so I think it really got to be a fun organization to work with, where you could really try a lot of different things because you can't sort of say, aha, in order to accomplish that goal, we're going to do this. I can see what you're saying. It's not a pure tangible thing, but I would constantly keep the big picture in front of people. And this is what we're working on. And each of our departments, what can you do to make an impact in that?
From the chat, Matthew asked, how much of a role does a leader's emotional intelligence play in servant leadership?
Well, we have an example in Washington the last 4 years of a very emotionally sensitive person. It plays a major role, because you gotta be able to understand where people are emotionally and all that kind of thing. That the people who get in trouble are people who are driven by their ego, and that takes out the emotion. And the ego is, there's two ways the ego gets in the way. One is false pride, when you think you're brighter than other people and all that kind of thing, and they're stupider. You have a more than philosophy, or you can have a less than philosophy. You have fear or self-doubt. But the whole point is how do you get your ego out of the way and realize that we're in this thing together, and I don't have all the answers, and I need your help. And the biggest problem with people with no emotional intelligence is they're all egomaniacs. The reason they don't have emotional intelligence is that they never spent any time listening to anybody. And and I'm working on a book with that title now, duh. And the subtitle is, why isn't common sense common practice? And so it really is that to see, and we want leaders who are emotionally sensitive, understand, and will listen to people. If people say, what's the number one quality of great leaders? They listen. They ask good questions. They're concerned. It's not about them, and they don't, knee-jerk things in, the middle of the night, and send out crazy emails, and so it's just the way it is.
I don't know if you remember this, Ken, from cohort 18. We had Kyle Clapp would always say, your ego is not your amigo. And that was always, we repeated
Yes.
that over and over again. So
your ego is not your amigo. Isn't
exactly.
that a great one? Yeah. And we kind of talked, it's everything good outside, or edging God outside, edging God out, or, but it keeps people away from you and what you really want to do. And the thing that gets false pride out of the way is humility. And the thing that keeps fear and self-doubt away is just to realize God didn't make any junk, that all of us have some great skills. I remember Jim Collins, when he wrote Good to Great, the two characteristics he found of great leaders was resolve, which is determination to accomplish a goal, and then humility. And initially he told his researchers, how could humility be the second biggest trait? And they kept on coming back and saying, I'm sorry, Jim, that it is. And, I think it was C.S. Lewis who said years ago, people with humility don't think less of themselves. They just think about themselves less. And so it's okay to feel good about yourself, but not in a way that you have to put other people down by making yourself feel better. We have an Egos Anonymous program that we have in our class, so we make everybody have participate in a 12-step egos program.
Yeah, a safe space for all that. But we are at time. So Ken, do you have any closing thoughts? This has been amazing. We've had over 150 people on the Zoom call. Hopefully you were able to scroll a bit to see everyone's beautiful faces.
Yes.
But
well, one thing I'd like to say is that leadership is a privilege. And a lot of people, I'll say to them, how many of you are leaders, And in my seminars, and hardly anybody puts their hands up because they don't think they're high enough in the hierarchy. And the reality is you're always a leader if you have an opportunity to influence other people in a positive way. And so you're a leader at home. You're a leader in your neighborhood. You're a leader at work. and all. I mean, so leadership is anytime you get a chance to influence the thinking, the beliefs, you know, the attitudes of other people, you're engaged in leadership. And so I just think it's a wonderful thing to constantly study and realize that you can make a difference out there every single day. So don't say I'm not a leader. Everybody is. The only people who aren't leaders are on an island by themselves.
I think if there's anything I learned about the pandemic, at least the science about the pandemic, is we are more connected than we ever could imagine, just across the world. So,
Right.
such a strong point. Thank you, Ken. I
Well,
can't
thank
even tell you
you.
what an honor this has been for me. So I want to pass this over to Kellen so that she can make some announcements. But thank you so much, Ken, for taking the time. I know a lot of us MSCL alums are excited for the holiday party this weekend or this Friday.
Holiday Zoom party.
Zoom party,
It's
exactly.
so
It's so much
sad because
Zoom.
we love to sit by our front door at our house and greet everybody. We used to have, almost 200 people coming for our
I know.
holiday party. So we'll
But
have more by Zoom.
Yep. But like I said on our first call when we were planning this, is it'll make next year's party so much more worthwhile when we can be together.
Right.
So, okay, well, thank you. I'm going to pass this over to Colleen so that she can make some announcements on behalf of USD. But thank you everybody so much for taking the time, especially those are maybe in the middle of the night, I think. But I'd love to, we're going to keep this chat. So any well wishes that you sent to Ken, we certainly will forward to him as well. So Kellen, it's all yours.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you all for attending this evening. And a big thank you to Ken and Christine for being so generous with their time. Always so very grateful. I also just really quickly wanted to share some upcoming events that we have going on. And Vicki, if you could quickly add the link to the events that are on our website as well so that they can register. You will see that we do have an event specifically for those that are interested in the MSCL program with Simon Sinek. And I think Joe Lara mentioned the Infinite Game. So we will be talking about his book, The Infinite Game, during that class visit. So hope you are able to join. And then lastly, for those 75 individuals who are the first to register, please keep an eye out for an email that will contain information on how to obtain your book, your electronic book. It's Ken and Gary Ridge's How to Win at Work. And thank you again for joining us this evening. If we don't connect anytime in the near future, please have a great holiday season and have a good night. Bye.
Take care.